Hey folks, I just saw BOTO, BOTO, Bottom of the Ocean, and this is my spoiler-free review. We're going to be talking about my experience, ways that I think the show could be improved, and whether or not maybe this is the right show for you to go check out. So it's a very indie, intimate, interactive theater performance with a focus on ceremony. It's sort of a meditation or an introspection on the practice or the art of ceremony. And it's a lot of fun. It's a good show, for sure. The show's greatest strength is probably its theming. It has very strong theming, which, as you could guess, is about the ocean, nautical themes, nautical vibes. A lot of the character work and set design is around the ocean and around water, and the rituals inherent to that. And I think they did a really fantastic job with that. The music in particular was extremely strong. So this is a very music-based interactive performance, right? So I've been to a ton of LARPs and theater pieces of that nature, right? This, when we talk about something like Meow Wolf or Sleep No More, I think this one really stands out for its focus on the auditory sensations. It's very much has a a one foot, as it were, in just the song work alone. And I think the showrunner is a musician, so that makes a lot of sense. It's clearly the best part of this work. And there are parts in the performance where they ask guests to join them in song, which I think was probably the best part. So definitely engage with that if you can. It's that's certainly the strong suit. And what else was here? And in particular, I thought all the cast was pretty good, but there was some serious discrepancy, right? So there was some cast members who were okay at singing, and then you've got the lead guy who I had pointed out, and later I learned, right, he's the showrunner, but that guy really stole the show. His performance was not quite paralleled. I would say maybe the opening performance was pretty good, but his was great. He was great. The weakest part of the show is probably the narrative. It has a pretty poor narrative, not very coherent. There isn't very strong theming. I should say there's very strong theming, but there isn't very strong plot. If you're somebody who really gets engaged by stories with a beginning, middle, and an end, this is not that. This is more, let's drop you into a world and hang out a little bit in some scenes, but it doesn't really have a story, and I think that's to the fault of the work. I think a little bit more work could go in there, and we could really improve this thing. In particular, I think there could be some more work on the characters. So the characters were a little bit, it wasn't very clear. So the performance itself is a series of interactions with different characters, and the characters are not well connected. So some more work could go into defining relationships between these characters. And I mean, I think it's not hard to see why this show started as a one-person performance, then it grew to a two-person performance, and now I think they have like 4 or 5 cast members. And I think the show needs to put in some effort to try and collate these different characters and to better understand why they're all together. Because right now it's a little bit clumsy in its transition between these different characters and sort of how they all gel together. There's a lack of cohesion, particularly with respect to narrative. The role of the guest or player is not very defined. You sort of play as a anonymous visitor to this space, and I think some more work could go into that to significantly improve the piece. Sleep No More is similarly, anonymized, but I think even that performance at times does a little bit more to tie the viewer into the narrative, and I think a little bit more work could have been done there, just to answer the question, who am I and why am I here? I don't think the show answers that question, and I think it's sort of a central premise of any interactive fiction. I think you need to start there. And I think some more work needs to be done in that front. I would say in particular there was no moments of awe for me. I think if I were to point out maybe one of the weaker points, um, let me rephrase that. I'll say I think the set design was consistently average. I don't think I was awed at all by the set design. I think if I was working with some of the teams I'd worked on in the past and in LARPs on this, we could seriously level it up. And I think there's a lot of really great stuff there. There's a few little gems for you to discover. Definitely check out the restroom if you get a chance. There's a nice little gem there, which you check it out and you feel like you've discovered something. But I would say that exploration and discovery are not a central role to this performance. And I think they could be. This performance, rather than being something based around discovery or exploration, it's very guided. It's very much, let me hold your hand and bring you to this place. Look here and tell me what you think. Or not even tell me what you think. Here's what I think, right? And then you can listen. That's kind of the vibe. And I think I think there's a lot of opportunity here to improve on those fronts. Some of the so there's character interactions between the people who are experiencing the event and the performers, and that felt clumsy at times. I think more work could be done to make the scenes tonally coherent. There was a few moments that stuck out. The worst offender, I had gone with my friend. He pointed this out to me. There's this moment where you are subjected, or let's say you enjoy a very rancorous performance, an aggressive performance. There's no way to, cut short of that. It was an aggressive performance. And following that, the actor comes to you and he says, tell me, a personal story. And it felt unearned. It felt a little disingenuous. Now that was followed by this character revealing an item which is, in fiction, supposed to be very personal. But that granting of something personal should have came first, right? As he explained it, it felt weird to be asked for something personal before receiving something personal in kind, and following that performance, which was just so, rancorous, it felt wrong. It wasn't a good fit. And, my friend, he didn't feel comfortable revealing a secret. And I think that needs to be tuned. Or if you're going to ask for that, there was other performances where they could have followed with that, and I think it would have made a lot more sense. There's a few other very clumsy aspects to this show. There's a limited amount of rooms, and there are several guests. So at various points during the show, there'll be sort of an awkward shuffling where some guests will be shuffled in front of you while you're engaging with the performance, or to the side of you. And then other times you'll be that guest being shuffled kind of here and there. They did, I think, distract from the performance. And I know that we could have done some work to fix that. The other thing was, and this is just subject to COVID, times being what they were, but there was a few. So in the intro email, it says very clearly that guests wearing masks is optional. During the performance, they said very clearly that guests wearing masks was not optional. You have to wear a mask. So there was a few things like that, which were different than what you thought they would be. And that could be cleaned. That could be cleaned up. It was sloppy. It can clumsy. It could be straightened up. The worst part of the performance was a brief interlude, which, to better understand, I need to give context for how this show is priced. So they did this model, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I've seen it done well. In this case, they did not do it well, where you can pay for your ticket, but you can pay a little bit more for additional experiences. So let's say the experience has 4 rooms that you enter. For maybe 20 bucks more, you could go into an additional 2 rooms. I think this was a bad creative decision, especially because this show has been consistently sold out months in advance. They should just make the max price the only price and give everyone the full experience. Because if you don't pay for the full experience, and I did not, I paid for the base amount, you are asked to sit down or stand in some cases and simply wait until the other guests have engaged with those additional content rooms. And that sucked. There's some media, so there was just auditory media, you know, these pre-recorded sounds that you would listen to as you waited patiently for maybe less than 10 minutes or around 10 minutes. But it did not feel good. It was not great. It was a little bit messy. And I think for no reason, especially because, like I said, the show's being super sold out. Just make everybody prime time. If it costs 150 bucks, whatever, I think you'll book it. I would also recommend, now I'm getting into recommendations a little bit, but I don't think this performance should have multiple person ticket options. I think you should be forced to go alone. I think that would improve the experience, in my humble opinion. I think that would really help. I think it's also going to lean into the clientele that are a little bit more engaged. I think the kind of people who'd be willing to do a solo performance, I think, are the kind of people you're looking for. So those were a few notes. What else? Yeah, as I said before, the tone vacillated from somber to silly in a way that never felt quite right. I think the humor reminded me a little bit of Welcome to Night Vale. You know, some of their live shows, some of that humor, if you're familiar with it. This sort of a little bit zany, but also serious in a way where maybe you can't quite tell the truth. Particularly, you know, the auditory, when we were sitting alone, you know, alone in this cold room, waiting for our turn, there was some jokes on the audio, and I appreciated that. I thought some of them were really funny and somewhat in theme, and I thought they did a good job with that. But then other parts were very serious, and then other parts were intentionally a little silly, and it just felt like it vacillated a little bit too much, and it was hard to pin down. If I were to approach this from a storytelling perspective, I would have centered emotions on characters. I would have said, okay, when they're engaging with this character, this is going to be silly. This is going to be somber. This is going to be, you know, serious. And I would try and base it around each of those characters so that you're kind of getting a little bit more tonal consistency. Because I think that's the issue. And that's you know, I've done one-man shows before, and it's a constant issue because when you're designing a show and you're wearing all the hats, then you've got to be all the characters, right? But I think there are certain ways that you could do it, and you can ease those transitory periods between tone. I think some work could be done there. Okay, what else? I would highly recommend buying the additional rooms. So if you're thinking about going to this show, and what I said encouraged you, and I do recommend this show. I want to underscore that. I think it's a very good show. I would recommend buying the additional rooms and going alone. So just pay the max amount and only buy one ticket. Okay, so lastly, here's just a bunch of suggestions to the creative team about how I might improve the experience. First, I would highly recommend that when you're transitioning guests from one venue to the next, in some cases that shuffle, it's a little bit odd, it's a little bit awkward. I would suggest, and this is a little dangerous, so you gotta watch out on this, right? but I would suggest you blindfold the guests. Even if transitions take another 5 minutes in total, when you're thinking about all the transitions, those 5 minutes are going to be well earned. Man, there's a lot of bandwidth that you get by closing somebody's eyes. And they engage with that a little bit in the show. But I would highly recommend blindfolding your guests. Then when they're in the room, they're fully immersed in the experience, then you remove the blindfold. I think you'll be surprised at how much that heightens the show. Next, I think the show needs to give guests time to explore. I don't think there was sufficient time to explore. Even during the waiting periods, those moments, if you were going to go with them, and I think they're shitty. I think they need to be removed. But if you were, let's say, tough luck, kid, you got to have the waiting period, then I think there's a lot of work you could do to craft immersive spaces that allow for exploration. So, for example, when I'm in one of these waiting rooms, I'm just sitting there and I'm listening to some audio. What if instead you put me in a library and with some task? I need you to help me sort these books. How do I sort these books? Well, and it could be something thematic. It could be something silly. Here's just a quick example off the top of my head. Like, oh, I need you to sort these books based on how often the letter B appears in the first page or something like that, right? Something a little bit silly that requires them to do a little bit of work. And then you curate the books, obviously, to be in theme, in tone. And maybe you open up a book and you realize, oh shit, there's annotations in here and something's going on. I think there's a lot of work you could do there, and you can give your guests time to explore. There was not exploration in this experience. It's not an exploratory experience. It's a guided experience. And I think a little bit of exploration could go a long way. Which I'm gonna skip to this point, actually. I would highly recommend you find a way for the guest to convey some element, some choice. Give them some agency in the performance. Something at some point, right? To make a decision. And I mean, honestly, it could be something very trivial. They don't need to know what the consequence of the choice is. They don't need to know what would have happened otherwise, right? Because maybe it doesn't make a damn difference. But if you ask a compelling question, I think something really awesome could happen. The intro survey is cool, but it doesn't pay off to anything. There's no callbacks, and that doesn't feel great, right? There should be. Write something down on a piece of paper and then whisper it to one of your coworkers, and then that coworker says, "Oh, I heard your favorite color's... No, I picked this one out for you because your favorite color's blue." And it's like, "Oh, you knew that from me because you took the survey," right? It's like those little callbacks, they add up. And I have to tell you, every time I've done that for my players or guests, whatever you want to call them, they've responded. They've certainly responded to that. It does make a difference. Particularly, it makes a difference given how long ago they said it. If you ask, for example, something like, "What's your favorite animal?" And then 2 hours later, you say, "Look on the screen. That's your favorite animal." That's more powerful than if you do it 2 minutes after you ask them. Okay, just something to note there. What else? I would remove the paid DLC. The paying for the extra rooms. I don't think it's smart. I think there's no need. Additionally, I think you just need to up the price, and especially if the alternative is sitting in a room, waiting to just listening to some audio. I think it's the weakest part of the show for right now, for sure. It's the weakest part. So that's what needs the most fixing. What else do I want to do here? So I talked about interaction. I would really underscore that, this idea of putting somebody in a library or something like that. I think Sleep No More does this really well, where they create some very awesome, as in awe-inspiring set pieces, set designs, and clearly they had a hell of a budget, right? So I could appreciate that. But you go into these rooms and you're like, oh shit, that's something, and I didn't feel that here. I didn't feel like that. So the last thing these are just a bunch of questions, okay? These are just some questions, right? But I'd be very curious to ask what guest to guest interaction might look like. Um, imagine this. Let's say, because that's a big part, right? It's a meditation on ceremony, but here's or ritual, right? But here's the thing: you're only a recipient, I think. In some cases, you're a participant, right? But it doesn't complete the cycle. Like if we were just to come at this like from a design perspective, it's like I've taught you to run. Now you've run with me. What's the next step? Now you need to teach somebody else how to run. And I don't think the show engaged with that. And I think there is room for it. I don't think you need to be that creative to find room for it. I think there's something there. What could that look like? Oh, I don't know. Let's say there's a section where somebody who's wearing a mask explains to you non-verbally how to do a simple dance. Now they put a mask on you, and another guest comes into the room, and suddenly the person who taught you stands to the side, and they motion for you to explain how to do the dance to the person who's just entered. What might that feel like? What could that do to the performance? I think it could do a lot of good things. So I think guest-to-guest interaction is an axis that I would definitely think on for this show. For sure. And then, so this guy, right? This creator, I think he's a real music genius. Music, as I said from the start, is a very core part of the show, and it's the strongest part of the show. But I think I would be very interested to see what might happen to this performance if this music genius teamed up with a storytelling genius, particularly, an interactive, storytelling genius, somebody who's done, LARPs and stuff like that. I think there's something special here. I'm really excited to see what this creative team comes up with next. I think there's a lot of potential for this stuff, and I think it could be scaled in a very rewarding way. So I wish a lot of luck to the team. I think it's awesome that they're performing in Corona, where, to be honest, it's kind of hard to find interactive fiction experiences like this. And I think it's something the world needs, man. People love art. So it's a great show. 4 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend you check it out. Very good show. Yeah. That's all. Thanks. And of course, if you checked out the show, let me know in the comment section what you thought about it. How do you think it could have been improved? Were there any parts that particularly resonated with you? I've seen the reviews and they're pretty glowing. But it does remind me, it makes you wonder though, right? Because I have to be honest. So I used to work in VR for a few years. I did some VR interactive experiences, and we had something colloquially known as the VR effect. We'd say that, and this is just some chit chat jargon here, but the VR effect was when somebody went into VR to play your game, and they said, "Wow, this is amazing." But they weren't saying this is amazing because the game was amazing. They were saying this is amazing because the platform, because like VR is amazing. You know what I mean? I think that's. I've read some of the reviews, and I noticed a lot of people. This was their first time engaging with this sort of interactive media, or this live action role play, whatever you want to call it. And they were kind of like, "Wow, I've never done something like this before," right? Which I could appreciate, but I think relative to some of the other ones I've seen, this performance doesn't make, top 4, top 5, right? I think, and I've only done maybe like 10 to 15 of these kind of things. So, I wonder to what degree people because I've seen some really nice reviews. I wonder to what degree it's just that VR effect, you know? Because when you do an interactive performance like this, I think there is a little bit of that magic, you know, which is awesome. I mean, that's the best part about it, right? Because it's kind of like that magic, that interactive media magic, the magic of having somebody respond to you and talk to you and ask you questions. That's going to seep into anything, and it's going to just plus one any of the work you do, you know, from the start, right? But it's a platform. You know, we've got to build media on top of it. And I think this show rests on its laurels a little bit too much. Maybe that's the right term, but I think it relies on that VR effect a little bit too much. And I think I mean, this guy's young, right? This is a pretty like new kid on the block. I only know him from this performance, and I think he's got one other one, so there's a lot of potential with this creative team. I'm really excited to see where they go next with it, because I think just in terms of like, you know, creativity, it's certainly there. I think if this person surrounds himself with the right people, he can make something really extraordinary. Um, something great. Right now, I think it's very good, but I think it could become great. That's all. So yeah, let me know what you thought in the comments. I'd really appreciate your thoughts. And let me know if there's more experiences like this that you recommend. You know, there's less and less these days in the city, especially with Corona. But I'm always looking for this kind of stuff. I love it. All right, cheers.